here from Gravel by California in Madera County, where you take in Everyone Loves Raymond. Now, Fresno Cycling hosts a number of club rides and events throughout the year that scale all the way from the Central Valley up into the Sierra. Now, Henry has taken me up high into the mountains, but because it's springtime, we're able to go lower into the foothills here where the temps are cooler and this lush greenery. So, if you see a smile on my face today, it's not that this is a sitcom, it's just gorgeous out here. Let's roll. People may not be familiar with the town of Raymond, as there's less than 1,000 residents spread out, sitting roughly 20 miles northeast of Madera, that was founded as a lumber town in 1876, laid out diagonally, not because of Highway 99, but from the Southern Pacific Railroad 4 years earlier, and now serves as the county seat of the same name. The focal point you'll notice in Raymond is its general store, which has been in place since 1914, with a bar including plenty of stool space on one side and a doorless entry to the store and restaurant on the other, as the staircase to the former hotel is now closed, as Raymond was once the terminus for trains, as visitors used to take stagecoaches up to Yosemite. The ride started in Footman Park, led by a number of cheery volunteers whose enthusiasm was contagious as we lined up for the final ride of the day. Everyone Loves Raymond is comprised of 2 loops that can be done as one, known as the Kager. But Vic and I did the shortest route in the Pint with a lot of rolling beauty and a big climb in the middle. We had a steady and smooth rollout, but not as polished as GBC's high five skills, which I wish was caught on camera. Starting our journey onto Raymond Road, as it was a super relaxing way to start a ride, setting the tone that today felt like a tour, and not one of those grand racing ones in Europe, as we quickly came up on our landmark, with the Frontier Inn sitting across where the tracks used to extend, as it doesn't take long to get out of town, but a lengthy time to get to the next, soon turning towards Bailey Flats Road, and away from Raymond's ties to the granite industry, as it was time to head into the foothills. It was a light climb to start, as the landscape began to open up, with the grade requiring a minimal amount of spinning, as ancient remnants washed down from the Sierra became more prevalent, leading into our first downhill of the day, with the descent pretty much in a straight line, following this tranquil creek, with others taking advantage of it too, as I pondered if I already released our new Gravel by California jersey yet, with the start of this ride almost going by too quickly, crossing the 5-mile mark where the creek stopped paralleling us, as there was more character coming along. The Chowchilla River would become our companion the next 11 miles, which naturally raises your curiosity as you want to be closer to the water, but it's still a time to pull out the camera, which everyone was guilty of, feeling the coolness from the flow, even though we were hovering just above it, meaning it's worth taking a moment traversing it. It was primarily rollers following the Chowchilla River, but because we were headed upstream, we were trending only slight overall gain in elevation, which I could illustrate better if Vic's camera wasn't so dirty, because from my angle, you could clearly point out. The particulars of the ride would change right after mile 9. And I don't mean the structurally questionable 1958 bridge that only averages 62 vehicles a day over Stripe Rock Creek, but how right after we'd have our first taste of dirt that became significant to this experience, as this was one of my most esteemed sections of gravel I've ever ridden. For starters, the surface was incredibly smooth, that was firm, like a regular road, that we would call it
Not bad at all,
why?
because it's like champagne gravel.
Ooh la la! This ride was also a remarkable tribute to the color green. Not just the amount of it, but how the lack of shadows from the spaced out foliage allowed us to see the saturation in its purest form, with new perspectives, corner after corner. And while we were still following the Chowchilla River, the surrounding hills had a sharper angle since entering dirt, where you could feel the power of this channeled water. While we were either constantly climbing or descending, it was remarkable we had only stayed within 200 feet of elevation in this stretch. Weaving out and in towards the river, it's clear we weren't the only ones having fun, as from the viewing, there was more neck movement than a chiropractor's office.
Wow.
There was a little hop to our step as we approached the two forks of the Chowchilla converging, allowing us to ride near river level, as this was as perfect as a moment could feel. I was starting to think that Vic took a dip, and he thought the same for me, with just a couple miles left until the pit stop, and we had been pulling over enough already that we didn't mind helping out with shifting issues and assessing ourselves. If there was a SimCity for gravel terrain, you would throw in mountains, big waterways, great roads. Am I in a program? We knew at some point we'd be moseying into the pit stop, ready with plenty of foods and fluids, and overstocked with smiles and laughter, but also beautifully situated on the East Fork, with one last bridge crossing ahead of us, which appropriately let us say goodbye to the Chowchilla, having a Wizard of Oz feel, with springs popping and flowers blooming, as the Wicked Witch of the Steep loomed ahead. While Acton Grade Road is mostly climbing, it's the roughly 1 mile paved section averaging 10%, which will weigh on every part of your body. You may believe the hard part starts early, but you're actually taking it easy on the dirt, as the concrete is shoddy, but still has plenty of grip to assist as you gain elevation quickly. And while the grade does go heavy into the teens, I'm sure tolerance was high for those that had to hike, as I'm sure everyone would take the trade-off of walking for just a few minutes against today's experience, which you'll never forget, as there was nothing that could have wiped these happy grins from our faces today, with the grade backing off at the top, but still responsible for some heavy streams, as we welcomed dirt, knowing the climb was tapering back more, as everyone mounted up again, with there still being 2.5 miles of dirt left on Acton Grade Road that was mostly of the uphill variety, but not as gut-wrenching on the chain, with still some nuances off the road to the side, making this a picture-perfect day, as smiling was undefeated, enjoying this middle section of descending, weaving our way around for a mile, now being introduced to the color blue, as our springtime palette continued to flourish, which we experienced at a more pastoral speed, with the last 3/4 of a mile ramping up, averaging the grade in the high single digits, questioning if the sedimentary boulders dropped from the sky. That was a distraction long enough to get us onto pavement in our final phase of our ride. The last 15 miles trended downhill, with the first 2 going by quickly on what could be called Road 600 or Grub Gulch Road, noticing that yellow lines makes you want to ride faster, and why these equines would be moved to higher elevations in the summer. But our tendencies would be headed in the opposite Z direction, turning off onto Road 612, that you'll also find on maps as Hartman Cutoff, which again was in very good shape, and I guess we know the reason why. As we zipped to and fro, life around us moved at a slower pace, which you could take in because the downward angle wasn't severe.
It's amazing to be in the foothills here and just not have that much undulations. Just nice, smooth, everything you would want in gravel.
While this road was certainly pastoral, we did have to keep an eye out every once in a while, as the scenery was 99.9% just landscape, with the second half of this road taking a different feel, where the contours dialed back and the surroundings felt more like a meadow, seeing just trace water elements unlike earlier, as we entered our final dirt sector of the day. On first glance, you wouldn't know we were back onto Raymond Road, but our time on here was surprisingly brief, as Road 612 was the more direct route back, with the speed at first showing why it was the proper choice, with a lot of stone foundations abound, without much settling on them, which would be revealed as a byproduct of the over century-old quarry that was central to the town of Knowles, including this tucked-away chapel built with local products, with the local activities still after the quarry's heyday. And with one last hill climb, it was time to do the opposite of let's roll, as we pulled back into Raymond, as the Fresno Cycling Club was ready for our arrival, as we were eager to dive into some tacos and such, feeling fully rejuvenated on a ride that properly ushers in spring. Well, what an experience. I mean, it's one thing to get to ride within all this beauty, that leaving a big imprint on me, but another thing when the riding itself, you can focus on the views. Catching the foothills this time of year, perfect with the green, the water. For us, we get to do the other half next year, so thank you everyone from Fresno Cycling and Henry for putting on an event like this. Anyways, if you want to support us, go ahead, hit the subscribe button, or go to our shop, or support us on Patreon, so we can bring you more from the state of dirt.